Hello and welcome to the Long View podcast, where we take a deep dive at games that we've been able to play and study and take a look at, and we're all experts, right, Efka?
I'm an expert at all the game.
All the games I play, I'm an expert at. Right? No questions asked.
Yeah.
Let's throw that one up right to the start here. Nobody's an expert. We all just enjoy these games, love talking about them, and we're going to be focusing entirely all of our resources on one game for this episode. Before we get started with that, though, I'm the host here, together with TC Reed. I'm Joe Sallin, and we are going to be talking about the game Kemet. And for that game, Kemet, we've brought on an extra special, one of my favorite reviewers out there in the industry, together with Elaine, and that is Efka of No Pun Included. How are you doing, Efka?
I'm all right, thank you. I am also one of my favorite reviewers, so it's working out great. We have something in common.
To me.
Let's not get too ahead of ourselves there, man. I said one of. You still,
Yeah, okay, fair enough.
You still could drop a few rungs here. So, And that maniacal laughing in the background will continue throughout the episode. I'm not sure who it is, but TC, how you doing?
I'm good. How are you doing this morning, Joe?
You know, it's good thing that we got these things started a little bit earlier because I was about half awake when we started. I sent everybody the wrong link. We almost didn't get this thing off the ground. But you know what? We're all here and we're all ready to talk about an awesome game. So I'm excited to hear about this one, and I'm also just thrilled to be able to share some airtime with such an intelligent individual. And I said that looking at this hand mirror in my hand. So now that we've all given ourselves a little bit of boost of confidence, maybe we can actually talk games here. How's that sound, Efka?
That's pretty good. I was about to say that you don't flatter me enough. Can you flatter me some more? But then you kind of spun it around at the end.
It's me. That's right. I like talking with me, actually. And then I like listening to my own stuff later on.
Isn't your own voice just amazing? You know, you're just this is so good.
Yeah, like I just keep on I listen to it in the car and I'm like, man, I agree with everything this guy says. It is really just it's an echo chamber on a new level. So
I don't think we can go any further without it getting really weird.
I think we're going to have to go backwards then to lots of time BC. You know, an interesting fact I heard recently was that there was more time between the pyramids and the birth of Christ than there is between the birth of Christ and present day. And Kemet, for the uninitiated, is actually a term to describe ancient Egypt. It's like Egypt in Egyptian, right? That's where
I believe it's Egypt in ancient Egyptian.
Okay.
Yeah, and I actually also heard that at school. I remember when we were being taught about Egypt, but then some time has passed. I wasn't sure if that's true any longer or not, because it's been some good time since I was in school.
Just a little bit. Well, we've got Wikipedia for that too, and I'm pretty sure that what I read on Wikipedia here, from what I can remember, was that Kemet actually means Egypt in ancient Egyptian. So that together with being the best place to buy donuts on the western side of Africa. So I don't know where the rest of that stuff came from, but that's I think that might be kind of the dangers of using Wikipedia as a source. You end up with things like the Kotahi. Ooh, yes, recent news there. You end up with the Kotahi in your game about Japan.
Did you see the news broadcast in New Zealand where they had him on the show?
I did not. No, how was that?
It was about what you expect it to be. Just they kind of treated it as a peculiarity, and apparently Simon wrote to him on the day when the news show went live and said, well, all right, you got us. We're going to send you and your friends some games and stuff. And so I guess they're taking it with a stride. But I suppose in that position, what else have you got to do? You're make the best of that situation.
Yeah. Well, I mean, they've already got a cool looking piece, and they probably got something interesting that it does. I mean, when it comes down to it, there's fantasy in the game already, right? So... But I suppose, I don't know. I mean, in the game that we're referring to here, Kemet, it's kind of a similar idea almost to this Rising Sun from Cool Mini or Not. That game is unreleased. But here in ancient Egypt, you're going to be enlisting the help of some mythical beings along your ride to try to, I suppose, obtain the most victory points.
Well, yeah. It's actually, well, there's a big distinction there. It's not the most victory points, it's the first person to get to a certain number of victory points. And that makes it very much more of a race, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And I think it is an important distinction because, well, it's not a Euro game, but so many games, you know, and especially Euro games focus around, you know, well, we end the game and then see who has the most points. But actually, it doesn't work that way at all. It's more akin to games like, you know, if you played Oracle of Delphi, for example, more
Rise of
recently.
the Ganges is a recent one too.
Yeah.
It's kind of, you know, like a race to the finish.
Yeah, so they're not actually points. They're just like who triggered something first, you know? And I think in that way, they're an abstraction. And I guess all points are just an abstraction of things you achieve. But
depends on what you call it. You can have reputation. You can have, what is it in Lisboa? Wigs. I think in Lisboa it's wigs.
Well, yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, but those are just monikers. I feel like in Kemet, they function in a different way. You know, it gives the game a different feeling.
Yeah, and I would agree with that. You know, it really is, like you said, a race to get to a certain amount. And because of that, when you have a game like Kemet that is very heavily interactive, arguably, like you mentioned, arguably a Euro game. Is it a Euro game? Is it a war game? You know, when you've got the level of interaction that you see in a game here, which, I mean, if I were to give a specific categorization, I would say maybe a dudes on a map game.
Yeah. There isn't a better term that the board gaming community has come up with that genre of game for some reason. Like
disappointing term, isn't it? Yeah, like a hyphenated term that includes like colloquial words. Yeah, dudes on a map, right? This is
what kind of game is this? What kind of game is this, Mr. Reed? It's there's some dudes and there's a map, but the dudes on the map. There you go.
Yeah, I wish. So basically, yeah, it's that. I wish it was named something else, but it is that very much so. And I think it's probably the finest example of that genre of game, and for me at least.
Sure.
But I've yet to find something that does it better, and there are so many reasons why. But
it does. What it does is, you know, it puts players in competition. You know. On the aforementioned map, but I would almost say that one of the reasons it succeeds so well is that the map itself kind of almost takes a background to the rest of the action due to its gerrymandered design that sort of makes it so, yes, it's a map, but somehow everything is equidistant to everything.
Almost. Someone pointed out to me that it's not entirely equidistant, but and I was amazed by it as much as anyone else, because the first thing that happens when you look at Kemet, the map of Kemet, you go, oh well, this looks wonky, and then someone tells you no, it's actually perfectly symmetrical, and you're like, whoa, that blew my mind. It is symmetrical, and then like years later, someone goes, actually, it's not symmetrical, and you're like, whoa, that blew my mind.
Yeah, you end up with these gigantic, snaky regions that function to sort of connect the northern parts of the map that would otherwise be in their own sort of regional conflicts. You know, all it is one single region to occupy that functions as sort of like the linchpin to being able to access other parts of the map.
Yeah. And do you know the other thing that immediately drew me into Kemet when I saw it, when I hadn't played it yet, it was a game with miniatures before games with miniatures were cool. And to this day, I still think they're some of my favorite miniatures in any board game, just because they're so kind of offbeat. And the miniatures aren't of like, you know, a lot of men. Sure, there's little tiny plastic men as well, but the cool miniatures in the game are not of like men. They're of like elephants and snakes and giant scarabs. And these are all things that can march along with your armies. So you can just imagine like these swarms of men marching with a giant scarab. And I don't know. There's something really cool about that.
Certainly. So the other, I mean, just production wise, we've got some pretty cool miniatures because they actually like ink washed them. And I mean, this obviously very surface level thing, but I would say that's not super common. The only other game I can think of that really did miniatures as well would be like Mechs versus Minions, and that's in its own category, like a love letter to fans of board games and League of Legends. So yeah, they look amazing, and as you mentioned, they join your armies of regular, kind of flick across the room little risk men.
Yeah.
And they really add a much more three-dimensional aspect to your armies. But that's not all. Like every single one of these units is specifically designed to, evoke something about, for example, the elephant is more of a defensive unit, right? Like you're using the elephant, and that gives you a defensive bonus to your army. If you get, on the other hand, a snake, it just basically neutralizes any other monster you'd be fighting against. I mean, each of them has that sort of a ability to fight against, but the way that you actually obtain them is through like a Euro game sort of upgrading system that is robust.
It's not just robust. It is very robust, but I think that the appealing thing about playing Kemet is that each time you play, you start from zero, so you're like perfectly symmetrical. And the game's not afraid of embracing that, because I think so many games of this genre just go, right, we're going to give everyone a unique faction and they can do cool things that others can't. And this game goes, no, actually, everyone is entirely the same, and you get to forge that path from the start. You get to decide how you're going to approach this game, and you can play, there are so many different variations of Kemet, that you can play, and each time you play, it's an entirely new puzzle you get to partake in, and it's a fun puzzle as well.
Absolutely. So you mentioned before that this is a race to get a certain amount of points. How does Kemet handle the obtaining victory points and there's temporary victory points, there's permanent victory points. How would you place Kemet in the realm of, when we talk about victory points, I immediately go to, in my head, Catan, Settlers of Catan, where you need a certain amount. And I previously, hey, TC, you remember before when I said something about how my first episode as a guest on the Long View was like Terra Mystica. It's like Settlers of Catan for heavy gamers. And I feel like every episode I need to somehow compare the game to Catan. And no, do I like Catan? No, I've moved past it, right? I've left that one in the past long before. But trying to get a certain amount of victory points, and specifically the main game, like the large game, is to get 10.
Yeah.
Catan!
Catan, sure. But unlike Catan and most other games, Kemet is unashamedly aggressive about...
That's what I was about to say. The rulebook flat out says, attack people. I think that's the first sentence in that rulebook. Is like, if you don't attack people, you're not going to win this thing. And that's really interesting, because you play with traditional Euro players, you really have to emphasize that. Like, no, you can't stand behind and build a big army and defend and win. No, you've got to go out and be aggressive.
I really love that about Kemet. I really love that it is unapologetically aggressive. It doesn't waste time with pretending that it isn't what it is, because again, not to compare it to other games, I very recently played Empires of the Void 2, which is nothing like Kemet, but it's the new game from Ryan Lockett that just got delivered to Kickstarter backers, and within the game I had this sort of choice of either doing something else or attacking my opponent. And either was equally profitable for me, and, one's had slightly more chance, but maybe higher reward, and the other one was more guaranteed, but, slightly safer. And that decision felt so whatever, because at the end of the day, if I attack someone, right, they're going to feel kind of not great about it, because they're like, well, you could have done something else. You could have done like X, Y, and Z. Why did you choose to attack me instead, and that just leaves a very sour feeling. When you play Kemet and someone attacks you, you don't feel upset with them because like there's no that's the sensible thing to do. This is I've created this opportunity for you right now, and you're going to exploit it. And if I was clever about it, I'd probably even set that up deliberately, you know.
Exactly. Yeah, that's the next point. You have to assume and expect that aggression is the key to victory here. Yes, there are some ways for you to further yourself on the victory points, accumulation without necessarily attacking others. But, the aggression in this game always results in obtaining a permanent victory point. And that's why that is just the driving force of the game. The game does not reward defensive victories without special technology that you've previously purchased, and that is quite prohibitively expensive, and there's only one in the game. So like that defensive strategy is not something that all of your Eurogamer players can play together. It really is a game that knows what it wants to be and does not, like you said, does not apologize in any way for putting players in conflict with each other. And I think that's what kind of makes it a little bit more endearing that I don't take anything in Kemet personally, but in that situation you described with Empires of the Void, not having played the game, but I can totally understand why there would be a little bit of, some bitterness when somebody chooses to attack when that's not the only option they have. And really it almost like, trying kind of giving players that choice to attack or not to attack is kind of maybe opening that door to more hurt feelings. And not to say that hurt feelings are in any way something that the designer needs to really, specifically design around. Like we need to just be tougher people, right? Like we're here engaging in recreational activities. Like, really, isn't a bad day of games is better than a good day at work, right?
Yeah,
but not for you, Efka. Anyway,
shots fired.
Oh yeah. So anyway, yeah, it is something where Kemet is so focused in what it wants to be that it is, like you said, the culmination piece of this horribly titled genre that we need to come up with something better for.
Yeah, I think the other thing about combat is so there's this sort of, when you approach board game reviewing and you look at a game, there's the macro and the micro. The macro is the whole scope of the game, what it's trying to do, what it's trying to achieve, is it succeeding, is it not? And then the micro, if you zoom really, really in and you pick at the little details, and how the game works. And I think as personally as a reviewer, I try not to dwell on that too much. But if something is really bugging me, but with Kemet, there's so very few things I can pick at, like there's almost not like I can see on the micro level, microscopically zooming in, like why everything was done the way it's done. And it makes sense, even stuff that doesn't quite work, like for example, initiative doesn't quite work in the game that much. Well, with the expansion, they sort of fixed it, but towards the end of the game, the initiative became so important that it was. And
there really wasn't anything you could do in the base game. Initiative, turn order. Yeah, you're right. That like the initiative was kind of the be all end all when you ended up going into that final round. And yeah, I think you're right though that the expansion did sort of make them more robust, and you could actually like impact the initiative by spending extra resources. And I would say that's kind of like I feel like that's because this game came out in maybe 2011. I mean, let's compare it to, say, like Terra Mystica, where at the same time that initiative could be extremely important. And in its base game, there was just one single first-player marker that got passed around, and you'd end up benefiting vicariously by another player having that around the table. Variable turn order is something that sort of Kemet, first of all, it has that variable turn order from the get-go. But it just doesn't, like you're saying, it does not have much that you can do to actually impact that. However, it is sort of a catch-up mechanism, but it's not just a catch-up mechanism. It's a power grid catch-up mechanism where it's an integral part of the gameplay.
It's also fun. It's fun to be able to say, unlike in other games, right, you're going to go first, you're going to go second, and, somebody gets to call those shots.
Yes.
And it's just fun. It's just an enjoyable part of the game. And I perfectly understand why they did it. But the part that I think really shines is how Kemet handles fighting, you know, and the whole card system that they didn't come up with because Game of Thrones used it before that, and so they're not the only ones. But hey, it's diceless, so theoretically you could say there isn't any luck, but there is luck because you never know what your opponent is going to choose, because all you're doing is basically you have a hand of 6 cards and they have different combat values, and you have to pitch one to play and secretly, and also pitch one to discard secretly. And so the card that gets discarded, you don't get to use until you've played all 6 of your cards effectively, or discarded. And so then you get to pick them up again. And each time you're fighting, you're like not just thinking about this fight, but you're thinking about any potential future fights that you might already perceive or not even yet, you know. And it's just such a compelling decision. And
it's
you
a
also
long
have
ways to be looking for a game system that is so frequently based on tactical maneuvering. You know, like dudes on a map games tend to be about, you know, like just exploiting weaknesses. But here, you know, you're sort of creating your own weaknesses or strengths based on what you're discarding. Nobody knows what you've actually got in your hand after that first card. Nobody knows what you've hung on to. And like you mentioned, there's different combat values. Now, it's more than just a strength value. Like, you've got other values there as well. How do you think that these combat cards maintain a, you know, like a feeling that each one functions and does something differently?
Well, I think they're each have their own purpose, and what's important to recognize is that sometimes you will have a lose-lose situation. And I love that the game has cards for those lose-lose situations. You know you're not going to win this. You know that there's nothing you can do about it, but you know you can hurt the other person in the process. And I think that's genius. You know, it's kind of like you know, the whole bee stinging you kind of situation. You know, it's not doing it because it wants to, but it's kind of like it's last hurrah. You know, right? Okay. Like, if you're swatting me, I'm not going out without, you know, taking the ship down with me, I guess, if you're allergic to bees.
If you're allergic to bees, it really is. It's a last hurrah, because you're getting to, I don't know, for some reason, I feel like Kemet, if it had any weapon, it would just be claws. It would, you know, it just has these horrendously large claws, and these just dig, you know, and every player with this deck of combat cards has cards that have certain amounts of claws, and now they're represented by blood drops, and that's how actual losses are handled, right? You're not just like, oh, well, my strength is this, that means you take this many losses. It's my strength is this, that means if I win or lose. Now, how much damage do I do? Totally separate value. And there's the ability to protect and you know, shield yourself from that damage, and only that damage. So, you know, you've got, like you said, cards that have different functions, because, you know, you'll have a card that has a fairly balanced strength, maybe one that you can play when you feel like you're in a good position to win a battle, but you don't want your opponent to play that damned 3-blood card. Like, oh man, because it's like when they play that 3-blood card to move on to that one, that means they knew they were losing, but they were taking you down with them. And then there's the last hurrah, big, like huge 4-strength card that you only have one of. I mean, there's different balances of these cards, but the fact that you're always playing one and having to discard one is, you know, yes, you're only having to go through 3 battles and then you get everything back, but it is something that still leaves you making decisions that you're going to be impacted by, and the entire table is kind of impacted by all of these secret decisions. Now, that's not even all to this combat card system. You've got sleight of hand worked into it in the form of the ability to play cards underneath them. And that, to me, it is.
Yeah.
Okay, do you think that works?
I don't think it works as well as it should. I think I think that's the one thing where I kind of go, I see what you were trying to do there, but in practice, you always find that, you know, people just stumble all the time, and it's painfully obvious if someone is trying to slide a card underneath, you know? Like, I always feel like it would have been so much nicer if there was a screen for that moment where you can just put the card down and then you manipulate something under the screen. Nobody can tell if you're putting something under or not, and then you just reveal. But
I can't disagree with that because, like, yeah, I would have to say that, you know, just being a strategic, you know, trying to win. I'm sitting there. If I see that they have cards in their hand, I'm always paying attention to how many cards everybody has in their hand. And if I see during a battle, if I see that hand shrink, it's like, I wonder what you're playing here. But there's all different types of card effects. You know, you've got card effects that improve each of the different combat values we talked about. You know, your strength, your losses, and your shields, your protection. And then there's other ones as well. There are ones that, like, if you win, you collect resources from another player. You know, so there are different, like, there's functions to these cards. Now, the cards are dealt randomly, though, which is kind of like the only element of randomness in the game is, you know, you've got the sort of Euro, I'll get there first, I'll take that first when it comes to obtaining technologies that are, many of them are one and done. Like similar to like, you know, Orleans, that's one of my biggest criticisms against Orleans is that that when you take a specific tile, that's like, you know, there's no more like it, and they don't feel to me very balanced. In Kemet, you've got multiple of certain tiles, and you've got a certain amount of, you know, like, I feel like just because there's other choices that do feel balanced, do feel like they can send you along a similar path. Like, there isn't necessarily like key pieces to a, you know, like to an aggressive build or a defensive build, you know, or an economic build. Those being the three main sort of paths that you'll head down in the base game. Like,
I'm actually with you on that one because, and ironically, I feel like the same problem in both games, Kemet and Orleans, is fixed by the same solution, which is an expansion, or in Orleans' case, actually promo tiles. So the cool thing about Orleans for me, and like whenever I play it, I now always include promo tiles, is that those new buildings get to open up totally new different ways of playing the game, which is so amazing. It's like, you know, so like in Orleans you have wheat, right? And wheat is just a garbage resource because it, like, why would you ever take wheat, which is worth a point? Sure, it's slightly easier to get, but like, you know, like silk or whatever is like 5 points.
The bacon, yeah, silk.
Yeah. Yeah, like so there's buildings that produce wheat and there's buildings that produce like cloth. So why would you take one over the other? But then there's in the promo tiles, there's like tiles that actually let you then take wheat and convert it into like higher point values and stuff like that. And suddenly you have yourself an engine going of, okay, so wheat is slightly easier to make, and I could like make an engine out of this. Is this a viable strategy? And each time you play, you're like opening completely new areas of the game. And I feel like Kemet has that same problem. Yeah, the cards are slightly random, but the sort of rule of thumb that I found playing Kemet is that all the cards that have a prior cost are generally worse than the cards that don't. Like, the cards that don't have a cost generally have a good kind of all-round purpose that will be always useful. And the cards that do have a cost are either situational or you just don't want to pay that cost. And so what I've done is, like, I trimmed them out and I added the cards because there's extra Divine Intervention cards in the expansion. And they just seem to work better.
Yeah, I think that what you said there, you know, like, you've got the resource in general, like, you're getting resources in the form of cards. That is a resource in the game. It's the only randomness in the game. It's also a randomized resource. But cards in general are great, in that some cards do cost the other resource in the game, and that makes them a little bit more, I would say, they're generally more impactful. So not something, you know, like you've got a card that can give you like 1 strength militarily versus a card that can give you 2 strength, but like costs you a point. And that's, I don't know if that's exact card, but that's kind of the general idea, you know, where it's like,
that is the general idea. Yeah. I think the disappointing part there. Sorry, I interrupted you.
Oh no, that's one for free, two for cost is just what I was saying. And I feel like though your strategy, taking into consideration what cards you get, and how much resources you have, like you've got that management system that's like a hallmark of what we think of as Euro games, and other another famous game that did this that really took the community by storm, Blood Rage, has a very similar method of spending and utilizing resources. But that's not all that Kemet does in terms of filtering your options of what actions you're actually going to take in a round. Like there's just, Efka, there is too many pieces of this. You mentioned the macro versus the micro. The micro here is just absolutely elegantly designed, tuned to this fine Euro game. But the macro is a conflict-heavy dudes on a map game. There really isn't other games that do it quite like this. There's just piece after piece. Now, I've kind of gone a little bit from where you were at. What do you think about how, like, the actual manipulation of what they call prayer points in the game, how you actually spend resources to take actions, and then you've mentioned, like that makes some cards weaker because they have an incurred cost. How do you think that impacts, the strategies available, and whether or not is that so impactful that it kind of does it get on your nerves at all when you draw a card that is not useful for your situation?
Well, I don't draw them because I took them out of the game. But
you just took out the ones with costs.
Yeah, I just took them out because I always feel like, well, okay, so I could get 2 strength for 1 prayer or 1 strength for free, right? So that extra strength could be just a unit I purchased for a prayer, right? But I haven't purchased it because it's only there for like that one moment, and I just find it like not as interesting for me, but that's just my own personal quirk. Other people might find it, approach it from a completely different angle, So I'm not saying that this is like a hard and fast rule that those cards are rubbish and these cards are great, right? It's just my personal preference and personal enjoyment and how I enjoy a game. But what I do have to say about prayer is that the one kind of downfall, I think, of the game, and it's not a downfall actually, but the one kind of thing that makes it not as strong, and I'm talking about the base game here, as it should be, is because generally, if you want to do well at Kemet, so here's the thing, like there's these power tiles and each time you play the game, you craft your own kind of strategy, and these power tiles, they give you different abilities, and each time you play, you get to choose like which ones you're going to buy and which ones you're going to combine and what combos are those going to make. And some of those do reward you with a monster that then walks around with your army and imbues that army with extra abilities and stuff like that. But what I found it boiling down to, there's 3 types of these power cards. There's white, which deal with economy, red, which sort of generally deal with aggression and aggressive actions, and blue that deal with kind of not necessarily defensive actions, but more like I don't know. I guess kind of like bigging yourself up rather than, attacking the opponent. And and what I find is that generally there's only like 2 good color combinations. It's white or blue or white or red, meaning that white is at a premium because that's the only one that drives your economy, right?
Yep.
And because this is a game that is based on an economy of prayer points, or well, like that's the currency, right? But also it is kind of like Eurogaming that way, the more you're able to achieve with your action or your round or your turn, the better your forces are, the more you're going to do in the game. So having access to those economical powers is what's going to enable you to be good at it, right? So everyone always fights for those. And I think that's kind of the one downside. But these are problems that I feel like you'd have to get a fair few games of Kemet in before they're going to even surface. Do you know what I mean? Like, okay, we've played it 3 or 4 times. We kind of, wrapped our heads around it, and now a metagame is emerging. So I'm talking about those things here, I guess.
Yeah, that metagame, I think you're right. Like just getting an economy going, that's legs. And anytime that you go for a red tile or a blue tile, now you're not just able to fish for these tiles. Like you have to first build up a pyramid to a higher level, and then so you're kind of choosing like which is going to be, I would say that white, as you mentioned, can almost always be your secondary power. You know, like you don't really care that much if you get that high up in your building your white pyramid, right? You start with a level 0 of everything, and you get to choose how to distribute 3 pyramid points at the start of the game. And so, you know, at the start, you mentioned everybody starts identically, right? No, there is no variable player powers. However, the first choice players make is like, you know, do I want to do 1-1-1 or do I want to do 0-1-2? Essentially, those are like your, because you've got to go. You can't do 3 in one pyramid, and because you're making these choices, it does seem like the choice themselves, as you've played it more, is going to kind of funnel you into, well, white gets me economy is good, period. And I would say I've seen that same sort of development. Like economy almost seems like it can't really be played with that much from a design space. And that's kind of unfortunate because like the Game of Thrones card game is something I played religiously and love that game, like logged hundreds of games. But at the moment when I kind of lost a bit of interest was because there was one faction, a Lannister faction, that was like, you know, their theme was economy. So, like economy is just good. It's just good. You know, the single most powerful card in the game gave you more economy and was an amazing card. Like it just, you know, it's an idea that's tough, I think, for designers to play around with when they're like, okay, what are we going to be having people going? And maybe they expected that, Efka, though. Maybe it's just the illusion of choice. You know, that maybe they expect that the higher level of play is gonna prefer or go for the white to get your economy going, and then it's like either you're going to diverge into red or blue.
Yeah, and actually, I hate to sound like a broken record, but in the expansion for Kemet,
we're talking about the expansion too. Yes, it's all going to be in here. Don't feel like that. No.
Yeah, so there's a new 4th set of power tiles, which are black, which also deal with economy. So just in different ways.
Choice.
Yeah, so you suddenly have like, more tiles, which is great in games with a higher player count, and you have more choice. So not everyone is as like cutthroat fighting for economy tiles, or you can just. I don't know. You can manipulate it however you like. You can just go, like, we're removing blue out of the game entirely. It's your playground from then on. I guess I love games that give you the scope to be a sort of almost like a mini designer before you sit down and play the game and say, do you know what? We're just going to let you take this out if you want it. And it's fine. You know, we'll just see what happens. Maybe it'll be a wreck, but maybe we'll enjoy ourselves. Maybe we'll discover something new.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think it's really interesting how you've compared the black tiles and really put them in perspective for me. Because when I first read all about the black tiles, I was kind of like, they kind of seem like the white tiles, you know, it's just kind of like little, it's like they'll give you an economy, but it's kind of slightly better than the white tiles, which generally just gave you prayer points. Seem to be focused around that. Here, you were more focused, it seemed to me, on getting more efficient, but it was specific. It would be like you get specifically like this unit, or specifically get the ability to upgrade this. So it seemed like it was less flexibility. White was, just excellent because it was a flexible economy. Black was a more efficient but less flexible economy. So my disappointment with when I first read the black tiles, and I was like, that's kind of similar to the white, is now I understand and put that in perspective, because now I have a choice with the economic faction. Maybe that was what the designers noticed. They were like, okay, well, everybody needs white. Now let's give them something else to more differentiate the paths that players take. Yeah,
I think that's why it's there. And there's also, if you're hankering for, blue and red tiles, let's face it, everyone likes the red. But
yeah.
Well, because it has a scorpion, right? So
nobody wants to be the elephant. Actually, no, my buddy Andy, he wants to be the elephant. So he's in the heavy cardboard herd though.
It breaks my heart because I love elephants. I think they're most amazing creatures in the world. But what the elephant gives you in Kemet, mechanism wise, is rubbish. So, so I really love that miniature as well. It's like I really want to play with the elephant, but it doesn't do anything.
It's like an earlier, easier tile to get, right? I mean, a lot of these
Yeah.
really impactful tiles will require you to first have leveled up your pyramid to a level 3 or level 4, and then everything at that level costs that much to obtain.
Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, so there's promos for Kemet and stuff, and that are of those colors, and there's also Dice Tower promos, and there's also the C3K expansion for those who want to go really all out. So the C3K is this wonderful thing. I remember when I bought the C3K expansion, I've not played Cyclades yet. So what it does, so there's two games, there's Kemet and Cyclades, both published by the same publisher, and it lets you, the C3K expansion lets you use stuff from Kemet in Cyclades and stuff from Cyclades in Kemet. And I bought the C3K expansion before I even played Cyclades, and I bought like a used copy of Cyclades just so I could use it in Kemet. That's how much I wanted it.
Yeah. Oh, and it really is. Like I am to the point now where I own Cyclades. I bought everything for Cyclades, hoping that these. I kind of have a negative opinion of Cyclades. I felt like it just took too long for what it was, and had a very, very much like an ending that frequently felt like pulling the rug out from under the entire table.
Yeah.
The thing is, I had everything for Cyclades, and then I bought that C3K expansion. I loved the way that they integrated the pieces from Cyclades into Kemet, but it still just wasn't enough to keep me hanging on to all that stuff for Cyclades. That, you know, like it just, to me, Kemet really had an action selection system that didn't feel nearly as restrictive. It didn't feel like it came to a grinding halt at the beginning of every round when you auctioned off what you actually did. And I do agree. I'm looking at just getting that C3K expansion and then just playing with proxies, you know, just like doing a little cardboard cutout or something to replace those miniatures that I no longer have. But it's the fact that it adds more of these plastic pieces that give you various effects that can even further round out what paths you can take in this game is pretty incredible. And I think that this mixture of Egyptian and ancient Greek really does make sense in my head, at least.
Yeah, totally. And it's cool. There's more things you can get and more strategies. And I think I've already said that that's something that I really enjoy in games. Go on. Tell me something more about Kemet that the listeners and I would like to hear. How amazing it is.
I want to talk about the plastic pyramids. Because the thing I really enjoy about this game is how it implements the pyramids and how you use them to buy the different colored tiles.
Yes, they are. There's something about them, and I know some people really don't like them. They don't like the texture or whatever, but I think they're wonderful.
They look beautiful. They're like marbled dice. I mean, it's a D4 essentially.
A giant one.
You never roll it. Yeah, they're huge. Yeah. They stick out from across the table, and they really are a centerpiece. And every single number on them, it's great that they're as big as they are, because from across the table, I need to know what level of tiles you can build towards, right? I mean, whenever I'm assessing your threat level to me and whether or not, you represent easy pickings, I'm going to need to know what level you're at and be able to see what type of tiles, as a player who's experienced it a little bit, what you might have access to. Are you going to be, how much claws do you have, or how much of a defense level do you have? And, there's just a lot of different aspects that to me are communicated very well through these gigantic pyramid that you never actually have to roll. It's a D4 that never gets rolled.
No, and this most ridiculous complaint that they're not actually pyramids, which I find ludicrous as a complaint.
What?
Well, they're not pyramids because they're not. Okay, so from a geometrical perspective, they're pyramids, but from a sort of classical Egyptian perspective, they're not, because pyramids from the top angle off into 4 directions, whereas the D4 angles off into 3 directions.
Well, that's okay. You're actually not riding giant worms in ancient Egypt either, so.
No, I know. Yeah.
Right.
I'm kind of taken aback that anybody would actually notice that and then use that against me. Like, no. The fact that it goes that far, that's ridiculous. It's a pyramid.
I know, right?
What's a triangular prism? Fine, we'll start calling it triangular prism.
Yeah, that's a rather interesting complaint, considering most of the game isn't even historically accurate at all. You know,
No.
it's more like Stargate than ancient Egypt, almost. You know.
Yeah, it's definitely like an ancient Egypt. Like it's the same as Greek mythology. It's an Egyptian mythological game. Like I am right there with you, Efka. That's, to me, is ludicrous. I think you used the right word for it.
But it's funny. I read that somewhere, and I'm like, this is funny. This is taking it too far and funny. And so when we reviewed Kemet, I did kind of go off on the tangent saying, no, they're not pyramids, sure, but like whatever.
Such a big deal.
Yeah.
Such an absolute big deal. All right, I do have another perspective I want to hear from you. There is, in this game, we've mentioned that there is permanent victory points that you get from winning battles. And then there are also, we've not really gone into it, but there are certain tiles where literally all they give you is a victory point. And it's a victory point that cannot be stolen from you, cannot be taken. It just inches you one step further. Think of it like a development card, and ding, 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 Catan. And you, by playing this game, are either developing and your army and getting to the point where you can do things, or you can kind of take sort of low-hanging fruit for points. There's another way to obtain permanent victory points, and that's by sending your units to this area that's like a temple of the gods where they get sacrificed.
Let's call it certain death. You're sending them to certain death. It's basically if you're not going to sacrifice whatever you send there, then someone else is going to go in and kill it. So
yeah, exactly. You want to send in like either 4 or 5, so that way you get 2 turns of permanent victory points, provided you're not getting your face kicked in.
You're not going to get 2 turns, because what's going to happen is you're going to send in 5, and then 2 are going to die. You're going to get a point, and then there's 3 there, so someone immediately sends their 5 there, and
then they
lose.
Kill you, and then they kill off their 2 remaining guys over the night.
Yeah, and they get 2 points, and you get 1, and you're like, But then someone else might also, after they've gone in there, like also go there, and it's kind of like this sort of like I don't know, Portal for Lemmings, where like there's no going back, and everyone just keeps jumping into it after each other, which is kind of hilarious.
Yeah, absolutely. So you're fighting over this ability to gain permanent victory points, because permanent victory points, which is very well depicted in the game, permanent victory points are going to be square tiles, whereas your temporary victory points are all circles. But there's several of those as well. Every temple on the game board is a temporary victory point. I don't know what your games are like, Efka, but usually my games of Kemet are a fairly quick land grab where we all claim a single temple as quickly as we can, and with as good as defensive as a holding force as we can, because that's going to be getting you income over the night as well as this temporary victory point. Now, but now, like you've mentioned, I feel like everything in this game is a little path for lemmings, because as soon as you station anything anywhere, it becomes absolutely beneficial to other players to go kill you, because you get a victory point for killing you, and you get that victory point that you had, and you're stealing it from them. So, I mean, you're sort of like fighting back and forth over these temporary victory points. And then you're actually creating your own victory points throughout the game, because every time that you get a pyramid to level 4, it's a victory point. But guess what? You can lose those. And those right there are absolutely the most, to me, it's the most riotous action in a game, when somebody like sort of looks at another player's home base and then moves on in. And the wall defense that you have can be bypassed by these cards, by the divine intervention cards that we've talked about, by the Phoenix character. There are ways that you can just come and hit them where it counts.
And that happens sort of towards the end of the game, I think, because that's where people really look for those last opportunities to like edge out the race and kind of, and it's this wonderful, I don't know what the right word is, cavalcade, I guess, where everyone just kind of piles onto each other and looks for like these opportunities, and everyone's got their own plan. Apart from,
it's like a scrum, huh?
Yeah, essentially that's what it is. It's kind of, that's what all boils down to, and I think that's where those temporary victory points really shine. It's, because you don't want to go for them too early because you might not be able to hold on to them. And actually, when I play Kemet, I always like to kind of not rush into places. I like to be the person that kind of just takes one step back. And even though it is a game about being very aggressive, you can't dawdle, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you have to take opportunities. But I'd like to take a moment to examine what opportunities are going to be created before I do something. And for me, that's the fun part of the game. And then just seeing that plan come together. And of course, everyone has their own plan. And your plan might not work because you have no idea what the other person is cooking up. Because, again, you have those little secret cards, those divine intervention cards that just might change it all up.
How do you plan? So how does that strategy, how does your specific perspective on sort of waiting back and seeing what opportunities present themselves, how do you leverage that when you're selecting actions? Because even the action selection mechanism in this game, tied to its apparently non-pyramid board, because obviously if the pyramids you're playing with aren't pyramids, then even the pyramid on your board can't be a pyramid either, because
it's flat.
It's precisely, yes. Well,
it's just a triangle, isn't it?
Africa, the Earth is also flat, but the thing is, the
don't.
All right, sarcasm aside, you've got these different levels of your pyramid, and each level has 2, 3, and 4 places for you to place action tokens. And so on your turn consists of placing an action token, and you have some requirements that you must fulfill by the end of the round, but it's kind of at your own leisure when you choose to actually do them. Like, you have to have a action token in every one of the 3 levels of your pyramid by the end of the game round. And so, like, as you're going, you're sort of trying to give yourself options without necessarily using up the one ability that you have to move in this specific tier. So it's an elegant, simple system, but how do you specifically maneuver that?
Well, I guess just holding off on what I want to do the most is the answer, because usually, like, I'm a very impulsive person. So for me, like, the trigger is basically, is this what I really want to do? Okay, then don't do it just yet, because, figure out how you can protract that action towards the latest and what other actions you need to take. Because the way I think you succeed at Kemet is you just watch for other people to make mistakes. Especially if you know the game pretty well. You're just watching for someone to make a mistake, right? Because that's all it takes. And then if you're quick enough to pounce on that mistake, then you're likely going to win.
Absolutely.
So yeah, just kind of like not.
Do you usually build up? Do you take the economic actions for your first thing? Because the actions you can take consist of just getting more prayer points. Just an action that all it does is give you prayer points. You have an action that lets you recruit, which is the only way. You only have one of them, and that's the way that you actually get your pieces out on the board. And then you have to have pieces to be able to attach these amazing units to. And go ahead.
On the first turn, I think I tried to not use the prayer action. I just tried to budget in a way where I don't have to use it on the first turn. And then the first round.
Sure.
And then on the second round, I'll probably, like, it's just a good stalling technique, praying.
Sure.
But yeah, I'll try to go for economic tiles and, things that will give me an advantage over the course of the game. And a lot of people go for temples early on, but I don't think that's necessarily the most necessary, that was wonderful wording, thing to do, because like, you can get equal advantages just by buying into a couple of tiles. And
not quite as lucrative as the other like paths, because for us it's always been a land grab for those temples, because it's like overnight you get a certain amount, like different temples will give you more of these prayer points than others.
Yeah. Sure. And I don't know.
But I see what you're saying. Like, there's another path there. Like, getting the right prayer tiles and being the first one to get them. I mean, maybe those are the two sort of balancing opening moves. Maybe, though, because you're saying that this game is more about watching for mistakes than actually, creating your own path to success. And that's any game. Any game with this level of player interaction is going to come down to that. And that's what's beautiful about it. Ultimately, are you playing games to interact with others? In a platform, or are you playing games to be all sitting around a table, enjoying others' company while you do your own separate mini game in front of you? And I think this one answers that question resoundingly with the former, that you're going to be looking for anytime somebody has essentially spread open wide, and you're going to be looking to, take that opportunity and leave them in a worse spot, and yourself getting a point and taking what they built up. So, but that's the drive of the game. You can't take that personally.
Of course, that plan falls apart if nobody's making mistakes. Then, then you're kind of stuffed, because you're like, everyone's done things and I haven't, and everyone's done them well. So yeah, it doesn't always work, but regardless, I don't know. I love this game. It's so enjoyable. It is so enjoyable. I can just sit here and go, I love this game.
yeah, I'm getting that.
Really, yeah.
I got so we've talked about this action selection mechanism. I mean, it really is, it's a way to give players quite a bit of choices, but still filtering them and causing a certain intentionality to the actions players are taking. That's what I think is interesting, because in a lot of games, especially these dudes on a map style games, there isn't a large choice of different actions that you can take. I feel like the sort of traditional turn is almost like you can sort of see it on display in Cyclades, because it's broken up and only one person can take every phase of it. But it's like you're going to get income, you're going to purchase reinforcements, you're going to set up your infrastructure, and then you're going to go attack everybody else. And that's to me, like, that's, you end up in old school games, we're seeing that. You see that this is something where a player takes all these different phases and other players can go grab a sandwich. In Kemet, you're talking about one little piece at a time, and you choose the order of it. And, what other players, who you interact with and what you're doing is all very much tied to that. But as you said, like, a lot of it just depends on what they're doing. So it's just a really cool little system. And to me, the fact that all this is contained somehow in 8 pages of rules is incredible. Yeah.
Not the best rule book in the world, but it's certainly brief, and it teaches you the game. I think the thing about Kemet is that it just changed the game in so many ways for like this genre effectively, because before it, I think we used to look at games differently than we do now. And so many people so many designers that make games now, even the same Blood Rage that you mentioned, well, I was Lord Eric Slang's works. I was inspired by Kemet when I was making this game. And everyone says that now. Oh yeah, we were inspired by Kemet, because Kemet was the one that kind of really transformed everything.
Sure. Yeah. And I would absolutely agree with that. I mean, it's so influential, but it's like almost like a Dominion style game in which it is still relevant. I mean, it is still so efficient for your time, right? I would say the one, like, your main dig seemed to be that in the largely base game things, then you kind of talked about how the expansion fixes them, right?
Yeah. But those are whatever,
Well, and I do want to talk about the expansion here. Before we get to that, the main criticism that I have for Kemet is that learning the game, you can't just learn the game. I feel like if you're playing, you have to learn 16 different tiles, and there's 3 different sets of 16 tiles. And having like that, they give you one little menu that comes with the game. You need to have one of those for every player. Just straight up print off 4 extra ones of those to start the game, because it is a lot of information. And even then, your first game of Kemet is going to take a long time for you to really understand the impact of the choices that you've made early. It is absolutely, to me, it's beautiful that once you get it with experienced players down to like 60 minutes, like it says on the box. I think that's amazing. But it really is a tough game during your learning period. Now, did you generally play this with have you played this with a learning group a lot, or did you generally play with the same group and able to really explore kind of at the long view of Kemet that way?
I think because of the nature of how I play games, I just don't generally get to do that. I don't get to play with the same people, a lot.
Yeah, it's a struggle. I'm in that same situation.
Yeah, so I think I don't necessarily envy people who can do that, but it almost feels like today it's more like this sort of weird dream of a reality that could exist than a reality that does actually exist. Like at least enthusiast gamers, they're always really fluid, and they play at conventions, they play at clubs, and they sometimes play with friends, and it's always like I can't remember a time where we sat down and it was the same group of people playing the same game, if we're not counting legacy games, because the nature of those kind of
they actually force you to do that.
Yeah, you have to do it, but otherwise, and even some legacy games like Gloomhaven, you can go, oh, whatever, someone else can come in and play today. Yeah. So I never get the chance to do that, and sometimes I envy people that do, but sometimes I kind of, I don't know, as a reviewer, I almost adapt to this sort of stance that games are like movies. If you like it, you're gonna watch it maybe even 5, 6, or 7 or 8 times, like if you like it a lot. But generally, a lot of new movies come out, and if you're really enthused about them, you're gonna go to the cinema and watch a new one fairly often. So the fact that I managed...
That's a point there, Efka, and I feel like we could have an episode about that.
I imagine so, yeah. But again, I have a unique perspective, right? So I don't think...
you have a very similar perspective to mine. Like, I mean, I primarily play at public game nights, and at public game nights, I have to be able to integrate new players into games. And what ends up happening to me is I end up just not reaching for the games that I know are difficult, are games that I enjoy for their simplicity, but they're difficult to get over that learning hump. And the learning, like games with learning curves, end up really like, I also teach for my profession, and it's like teaching to me can feel like work, especially if I end up in that situation where somebody is just locked up, they're starting to get frustrated, like because they're getting frustrated, I don't feel comfortable. And I love Kemet so much, but my patience was absolutely tested when I had a game of Kemet where we had not finished the first round in 1 hour and 20 minutes.
Wow. Okay. That never happened to me. But I had quite a few games where we had to teach someone how to play, or a few people how to play. And it's just a game that requires for you to be patient and kind of explaining that way, where you're not overbearing the person and making the decisions for them, but kind of like outlining the choices and saying, well, if you do this, this is what's likely going to happen. If you do that, that's what's likely going to happen.
And then I'm going to come punch you in the face.
And then I'm going to come punch you in the face, because that's what this game is. Yeah.
Yep.
And of course, that never feels great playing with people who are maybe slightly newer to board games, because they're struggling with complex mechanisms and the consequences of those complex mechanisms. And then you go and attack them, because of course that's part of the game. So this is, I think, a game that's solely aimed at people who do get that opportunity to just kind of like hang out together all the time and play that one game that we really like, where we get to punch each other in the face because we really like apparently being punched in the face. And games are social contracts, right?
That's right.
Social deduction games are just social contracts where you allow yourself to lie to your friends, and that's okay.
Absolutely. Well, I think, Efka, that you've really outlined the one, sort of thing that I would say, the one caveat to my otherwise absolutely glowing recommendation of Kemet for almost anybody, right? Is that it's got a tough learning curve, And when you couple that with the amount of interaction that's present, it can certainly lock up people and turn people off. So very much the pieces here, and in that case, I would say it's not, this might sound very very snooty, but I would say it's not the game, it's you in that situation. So how about the expansion? We've talked already about how it adds, it's a modular expansion, which is nice,
yes.
right? It allows you, like you mentioned earlier, some ability to design your own experience and say what direction you want to take. Like it gives you some of the tools, some of the reins of the designing, but I would still say that the game maintains the reins are firmly still in the hands of the actual designers here, because nothing here is like, OP, amazing, good, we got to play without that. It really is, what do you want to play with? And, there's a large module that's called the Path to Ta Seti. And there's also the black level of pyramids. And there is extra tiles that can get integrated into the base game. Well, no, it's mainly the black level pyramids, right?
Yeah, there's also initiative order and new divine
yes.
intervention cards and something else. I can't remember now.
We got the Black Pyramid and Power Tiles. We have the Dawn phase, which you've mentioned, which is like that new initiative. And then the Path to Ta Seti. And the finally one is a simpler one. Or no, there's two more. A new victory condition.
Yes.
Yep. If it's at least 8 during the day phase, so you can actually win like during the game. You can just straight up like win without finishing out all these rounds. And then it adds, and this is one of the things that I would say always play with, is the new battle cards. Right? There's 6 there's 6 cards in the base game. Now, the 2 new cards definitely distinguish themselves. One of them, because it's almost like the sort of like running up to the altar and pulling the, what is it? The organization at the end of Life of Brian, where they all show up and like that's, you have a card where you get huge strength, but you kill 2 of your dudes doing it. I've seen battles won by a player that has no remaining units. And in that case, I'm pretty sure the game doesn't allow you the victory, right? Nobody wins unless you have the winners at least survive, right?
I can't remember, to be honest, but it's hilarious if that's the case. I think it's funnier if you win.
Yeah, you have, so to get a permanent battle victory point, you have to have at least 1 unit left here in the rules.
Okay.
Yeah, and then the retreats in this game even allow players to either go to an adjacent territory or just take them back into your possession and just turn them into prayer points. Just turn them back into the ether that you can then plop down onto your pyramids and home territories.
Which is what absolutely fuels the aggression in the game, because you're never like, yeah, whatever, I'll just send them out, and they don't have to stay there; they can just disappear.
You never end up with useless pieces on the board unless you've chosen that or made that situation for yourself.
Yeah,
definitely the most groundbreaking, or I should say game-changing element of the game is the Ta Seti path. Now it even includes a lot of variability in itself and is an incredibly impressive design. You are going to take these boards, and these boards all have like an A side and a B side, and you play with only one, and they all sort of line up, and it forms a path with all these divergent choices you can make, where you choose a specific. You've got these priests that start on this path to Ta Seti, and you can end up recruiting these priests with special abilities at certain points, or you can just keep on walking them towards the end where they can get permanent victory points. Right? There's like all these different choices, and there's variability within it. These are all tied to move actions. So it even puts more of an impetus on players to be moving, because you get these bonuses in addition to, the base ability of moving to a place so that you can start a battle, which is really the driving conflict in the game. But, what it does is it creates, like, you've got these combos that you're building strategically, and now you can, like, bust a combo that turn, like, here, now I've got 2 extra attack, and guess what? You might have thought that I couldn't do anything, but now I'm winning this battle.
I think they're pretty neat. I only played with that particular module once, and again, for the simple reason, because it adds so much more complexity to the game. that you have to, like, if you're teaching this to someone, you're just like, oh no, I can't actually bear teaching that as well. I think it's nice. I don't think it adds that much to the game that isn't already there. It just kind of adds an extra layer in an onion that already has a lot of layers, and it's a good layer. You know, if it's an extra layer, it's an outer layer, so it's going to be a big layer, right? But but it's still a layer of an onion. You know, like there's a point where you go, this is fine. I have enough onion. I mean, I really like onions. Can I just say that?
I like onions too, actually. Yeah, I've actually been criticized for how many onions I eat at lunch, and they tell me that, like, I have people like apologize on my behalf to my wife, you know, because of how many onions I eat. So maybe I'm just the onion guy, man. Maybe I'm just the ogre. The thing that the perspective I would take on this to try to paint this in as positive light as possible. And I've only played it a couple of times as well, Efka, in the same situation as you. You know, playing with this, when we played with this with a group of experienced players, it was like, we won't play without this anymore. Yeah. But I would never play with it with new players. Here's what I think. You know how your monsters in the game all have specifically designed abilities? Here, what you're able to do is kind of design your own monsters. Now, that sounds really, really cool if you had like little removable meeple bits like in the Tiny Epic Quest or something. It's not like that. You've got special abilities that you're going to be, every time that you recruit a priest, you get a special ability and a priest. So now you have one extra unit, and every time that unit is a part of a group, the entire group gets this, whatever the bonus is. And if you do that 3 times throughout the game, every one of your priests has these snowballing 3 different abilities that are things like, you know, giving you an extra strength in addition to being an extra unit, you know. Other ones are giving you specific bonuses where, like, every time that guy fights, he gets economic advantages. There's about 15 or so different tiles, 12 maybe. Divine, well, I guess somewhere around there. 36. What? Okay, really? There's that many of them? Holy crap! 36.
I think quite a few of them duplicate.
Yeah, that's right. Oh my, I don't remember there being that many. I have them inside of a bag here. Hold on, there's no way there's 36 of these things. No way. I was reading the wrong thing. No. There's a bunch. There's a bunch. I read that wrong. I'm sure that I did. Yeah, it's a different token. Okay, yeah. Anyway, sorry. The thing is, though, you really are getting to design your own monsters. But like Efka mentioned, it is an extra layer and an onion. And, you know, if that sounds cool and interesting, play with it. There's all kinds of extra choices. To me, though, you know, there really isn't that need for an extra thing. I feel like Cyclades is a game that bloated like crazy with expansions. They were always trying to fix this underlying problem whereby, you know, just slow combat development with an ending that can sometimes feel like, you know, the ending of the Holy Grail, Monty Python and the Holy Grail. It just is something that the game could not fix, no matter how many expansions you added. And I stopped after the one that added Titans and the giant board, I had already purchased Hades, the crossover, and all this stuff, and it was all just like trying to fix. You know, you can't fix ugly. You just, you know, you can't fix it. Here in Kemet, these extra layers are extra layers to the onion. But if you have that taste for it, this is like a Vidalia. It's a sweet onion.
Yeah, it's just a shallot, right? That's a good onion. I like shallots. Not technically an onion, but whatever. So I really like Kemet. I think have I said that yet? Have we established that?
No. I was actually telling. I was hoping that our listeners would be able to hear that more.
Yeah. So I really like Kemet. And
you really especially like a format of an episode of a podcast where we only talk about one game, right?
Yeah, and if I'm able to choose the game that we talk about and say, hey, can we talk about this one? And I pick the one that I really like. We just get to yammer on about it for ages. Did you know that Rodney Smith also really likes Kemet? He's another person that's a Kemet fan.
not surprised to hear that. I feel like, is there anybody who really dislikes Kemet? I feel like there's people who are like, it's not for me, but I don't think I don't feel like there's a group of people who play Kemet and then immediately go to Board Game Geek like, I'm so disappointed with this game.
I talked to a person once who didn't like Kemet. I don't talk to them anymore, but like I had enough of this conversation now. No, I'm joking. But yeah, no. What amazed me is that Rodney Smith generally doesn't say whether he likes games or not, because it's like, well, I don't say what games I like and I don't say which ones I don't. But Kemet, so that was kind of a, I don't know. I wouldn't be surprised, knowing the publisher, the kind of publisher that Mathigo are, and how much they like expansions, especially for games that do well. I wouldn't be surprised. Do you think one day we'll see another Kemet expansion?
I think that we might see like a second edition or something. Where would they go? What is the uncharted territory here? What is it? Is it going to be Kemet in space? Right? Is that where they're heading with it? We're going to get spaceships and go off in other planets and fight their mythical beings. Like, I think that it's a game that works without an expansion for the most part. I think you've mentioned though, Efka, very well. You delineated how the expansion does, just straight up improve the base game. I would say unquestionably improvements in the way that it works with the dawn phase, and and just extra choice in terms of what strategy you pursue with what color pyramid you're going for. But I also think that I don't know that people are even playing with the Toss City expansion that much. I don't see it coming out.
Yeah.
It's I think that people who play with it really like it. But I think that if we see a expansion to Kemet coming out, I would say that it's more of a publisher that can't seem to give up. It's more of a Mathigo thing than a Kemet needs this, right? Like with other games, like with Terra Mystica, I'm still pining for that. I feel like at one point they teased that there was going to be an extra faction expansion, just that came out with a bunch of extra boards that were more variable races that you could play with, all with the existing pieces, kind of like Seven Wonders did. I feel like I'm still pining after that, right? That's something that's a big part of the game. And you mentioned early on that that's the big current in board games right now, is to want to have players exploring different angles from the very start through variable player powers. And in Kemet, yes, you are exploring different avenues, but it's not being done all through this, one gigantic, vastly different change that you obtain at the beginning of the game that just kind of guides what you do. So I think for that reason, there's no more necessary expansions. I mean, honestly, let's say it here, Efka. We got to the point where you're talking about the expansion to Kemet, and it was like we got to this point where I think your statement about onions is absolutely right. This game is like full. It's an onion that doesn't need any more layers onto it.
Yeah, unless did you watch the PAX Shut Up and Sit Down panel where they had the chocolate covered onion?
No, I missed that.
Yeah, so they were in Philly and they were in the market, and they apparently found a stall that sold chocolate covered onions. Yeah, because that's the thing that needs to be added to onion.
Yeah, I need to go out there now and try one of those. I am intrigued. But
they didn't. I don't think they even peeled like the skin off. They just put like the chocolate on top of like a full-on onion, right? And yeah, I think we're talking about that. The extra expansion would be probably the chocolate, wouldn't it?
It would, yeah, which would be maybe the most divisive thing that there is. I feel like just the design of this expansion itself, the way that they were able to get so many things right, like a modular expansion is just inherently going to appeal to more people by design than an all or nothing expansion. And yeah, I think that was beautiful, and I think that if they do expand it again, I hope that it would be similar. But I honestly don't. Yeah, I don't know what that chocolate would even be. You know, what are we talking about here? Are we talking about a brown pyramid tile now? Is it going to be, you know, the brown pyramids that, you know, what are they even going to do? Are they just going to be like elephant dung?
As long as they don't add green, because then they're just messing with color blindness. And like, there's no reason for that. Like, red's in the game, keep it without green.
There you go. Yeah, I think they did a good job. You know, we've just got red, white, blue, and black now, so it works. And oh yeah, I mean, this is because they call them power tiles. It becomes problematic. Just the naming here, you know.
Oh yeah, of course.
The red power tile, the blue power tile, we're fine there, but anything beyond that starts to get a little bit problematic.
I agree with you there. So yeah, are we done on Kemet?
I think we're done.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for joining me here. Thanks for participating in this long view, and I really think we've explored every avenue this game has to offer. You did a really excellent job of telling me how much. Wait, how'd you feel about this game again?
It's okay.
Just fine. Okay.
Yeah, just fine.
Meh.
Meh.
Yeah. Are we? Okay.
I bear it when I have to.
Yeah, there's this YouTube video series that's kind of like that. I look forward to it every, you know, whenever it comes out, but it's more of a can't look away type thing. I'm actually talking about my own videos because you know, they're painful, but they're ones that I have to come back to just to remind myself that I can't make those mistakes in the future.
Well, talking of that, can I plug myself a little bit?
You know what, Efka? I was trying to introduce that. Your video review series, on the other hand, is one that I really look forward to, and you started expanding into news. Could you tell our listeners all about what No Pun Included has to offer?
Yeah, so a couple of things. We do reviews, as Joe mentioned. I don't know if we were on the air or not, but we work a lot on our videos. Like, we work a lot on making sure that the script is not just like, I really like this guy. Oh, this game is, you know, like, you know, they're well rounded. We thought through all the angles, and we approach it from a professional kind of perspective, even though we're only semi-professional. And when I say we're semi-professional, that means that I've been doing it full time since last year. But there's two of us. There's me and my wife, Elaine. But we're hoping that this year it can be fully professional, and we're going to have a Kickstarter on March 15th. There we go. Ooh. There's a date. Yeah, and with your support, you might see one of the first independent female board game reviewers that are working professionally full time in this industry. So wouldn't that be something?
Yes, that is awesome. Elaine's perspective and your perspective, it's tough for me to separate them because generally I see you both together, working together and making the scripts. But to see her independent perspective would be very interesting. You have another level of like I mentioned, journalism in board games. You are bringing the sort of treatment that other forms of entertainment, movies, books, even video games, though there's all kinds of deep dark holes that you shouldn't call into that have happened with reviewers there, and you're not. You are taking that sort of treatment that has always been attributed and been allowed, and, you know, like the Academy Awards sort of, you know, to me, you're the type of reviewer that really gets at what the game, like you've mentioned, on a macro and a micro level, and makes it entertaining. Some of the most entertaining bits of writing and journalism out there, to me, have been reviews. It can be more entertaining to watch one of your reviews than it is to actually play the game.
Oh, thank you. That's far too kind, but thank you very much.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I totally recommend to go check that out. You're also doing like a news thing here that I've noticed coming up, right?
Yeah, so we recently started doing news for a couple of reasons. I kind of always wanted to do news because I always found board game news to be very funny. You know, I get excited about games, but there's just like these masses and masses of press announcements going, look at this new amazing thing, and it's just like, oh, it's another game. Okay. And I don't know, I always found that very funny. You know, the sort of like I get really unreasonably excited about games, but even I kind of go sometimes. Isn't this just there's just a tad too much excitement added onto it? And I think it's the same in this is not exclusive to board games. It's the same in every industry. You know, the marketing machine spins everywhere because otherwise you're not going to make sales, and if you're not going to make sales, you're not going to make games. It's pretty simple. But taking
it's like you're pulling out your phone and starting to record a video as opposed to just participating in the event.
Yeah, but taking a little bit of a Mickey out of it, I think, is perfectly healthy and a little bit of fun. So we decided we always wanted to increase the number of videos we do without somehow compromising the quality of what we do. So news is so great because the material is there. It's written for you. You just need to put your own spin on it, you know, add a little bit of humor and perhaps maybe, you know, make a little bit of fun out of it. And yeah, we decided to do news videos, and they're doing surprisingly well. We've only just launched our third one, and the views are really good. So people must be enjoying it, I guess. I don't know. So far, the feedback's been pretty good.
I'm glad to hear that. You know, I would just say that of your reviews, I'd like to give our listeners just, if you've never seen or heard EFKA before, and no pun included, first of all, crawl out of that hole, because you know, what have you been doing? If you hear me and you don't hear EFKA, man, that makes me feel extremely special. Actually, thank you. Actually, forget EFKA, just listen to me. Anyway, he's got some really beautiful perspectives, and why the ones that really resonated with me were games I'd never played before. Like your review of Seventh Continent to me was absolutely one of the most entertaining things I've ever seen. You also handled one. What was the one that you did? Was that the one that had like all the different types of grain, where you went and bought all the different types of grain? What game was that?
Oh my God, that was Spirit Island, I think.
Spirit Island, yes. It was, you had all these different types of grain, and that was just such an interesting thing. And you know, it's always helped, EFKA, that you and I have somehow synced up board game taste-wise very well, and that helps out. But even in the games that I have zero interest in trying to start with, which clearly shows we're not exactly synced up, I still find something very entertaining. Like your Meeple Circus, is that the one where you're stacking? Yeah. That was a very entertaining review as well. So those are a few great places to start if you've never have tried it before. And you know, there's a host of videos here that I see that are on your YouTube list that I have not seen, and I'm already excited to see what you thought of Fog of Love, because that's one that me and my wife have been playing together. So, you know, all kinds of different great games coming out there, and I'm super pumped that you came and talked about Kemet here, and I look forward to having you back on, you know, as long as you get to pick the game.
Well, it was an absolute pleasure. Thank you very much for having me on. I had a blast. It's been like 2 hours whooshed by, and I didn't even notice it. So, yeah, I know I rambled on a lot because I tend to do that, but I had so much fun. So thank you very much.
It was great having you, EFKA. And that's this episode of the Long View. Thanks for everybody who tuned in. I saw earlier, I saw Carmen, I saw Norm on the comments, and I just now saw all your guys' comments, so I was really interested in reading those. You can check out our live recordings of the Long View. And otherwise, just stay tuned. Subscribe to our YouTube channel so that you can see when the recordings are going to be coming, and you can come and give your own perspective on these amazing games that deserve the Long View treatment. Thank you. I'm Joe Sallin. I've been joined by EFKA. Thank you so much for being here, EFKA.
Thank you very much, Joe.
And TC Reed is out now. He had a family event, but he also, you know, his wife really loved this game, and he had some really great things to say as well. So anyway, I will catch you on the next episode of The Long View.